let me tell you about the most mysterious disease outbreaks in history. It's July 15, 1518 in Strasbourg, a city in what is now Germany. As far as anyone knows, an ordinary woman named Frau Trophia was just minding her own business. And the next day and the next, it was like nothing she'd ever experienced before. The outbreak of dancing madness would become known as St Vitus Dance. And although it would happen a few more times over the next few centuries, we have no idea what caused it. Others said that the water supply was to blame, or maybe it was contaminated grain that was causing people to dance themselves to death. In 1551, an outbreak hit Aachen, Germany, and lasted for 2 months. Then another one hit Paris in 1552. In 1564, there was an outbreak in Italy, and in 1674, it hit London. Each outbreak was different, affecting different numbers of people for different amounts of time, but all of them followed a similar pattern. According to this theory, it started with one person who began dancing after being overwhelmed by an intense psychological stress, so the transmission from person to person seems to have been a real thing, and the fact that people were driven to dance day and night until they literally dropped dead suggests that this was no ordinary outbreak of dancing mania. This was serious. That person may have been subconsciously motivated by a desire to escape their problems through dance, or maybe it was triggered by a traumatic event or mental illness. Ergot poisoning can cause convulsions, hallucinations, burning sensations in the feet, and the overwhelming urge to move. Why does it seem to have stopped happening since the 1600s? We don't really know. Maybe our ideas about cleanliness and sanitation have changed. Or maybe the culprit was a type of bacteria that only thrived in the Middle Ages. Boy and a girl were walking through the market when they noticed a group of people dancing. Being teenagers, they thought it was pretty funny and they started dancing with them. But within a few hours, they both collapsed from exhaustion and died. So it's possible that contaminated rye was to blame for the dancing plague, even if it wasn't the only factor. Even today, outbreaks of mass hysteria can cause people to act in strange ways, but none of them have ever been known to turn into a global pandemic. And this time, Western medicine was powerless to stop it. So while we may never know what truly caused the dancing plagues of the past, we can be thankful that they seem to be confined to history. And within a few days, nearly a third of the town's population was dancing too. But the weirdest part is that once the dancing ended, nobody in any of these towns ever came down with the sickness again. There was no second wave, no lingering effects. Once the outbreak was over, it was over. Western doctors were baffled. They tried everything they knew to stop the dancing, but nothing worked. Finally, they brought in a shaman to try his hand at treating the mysterious illness. And he did. He identified the source of the plague as a demon that had entered the bodies of the villagers through their feet and was driving them to dance until they perished. The only cure was an exorcism, and the shaman performed one on the most heavily afflicted villagers, driving the demon out of their bodies and restoring them to health. After that, the outbreak stopped and everyone lived happily ever after. Just kidding. The outbreak continued for another 2 weeks, but thankfully the rest of the world was spared from this strange and deadly outbreak of dancing plague. They kept at it for months, and nobody was cured until the spring thaw. A similar outbreak happened in 1436 in the town of Ulm in what is now Austria, and in each case there was no rye involved. The women who started the dancing outbreaks were examined after the fact and no signs of illness or poisoning were found. Perhaps the ergot poisoning affected the brain in such a way that it made people suggestible to the point where they began dancing uncontrollably. Due to mass hysteria, whatever the cause, once one person started dancing, others around them became infected by an unseen force and joined in. But we do know that neither rye poisoning nor mass hysteria can explain all of the outbreaks of dancing mania that happened throughout history. It was almost like a contagious disease, but instead of a pathogen, it was a psychological phenomenon. But these theories didn't hold up either. The outbreak spread to new areas, and by 1525, when the dancing plague was still ongoing, people began to suspect that it might actually be a divine punishment sent to punish the sins of humanity. But the mystery remained. What was causing this dancing plague? Well, modern medicine has given us a potential answer, and she wasn't the only one. At first, a few other people had similar feelings, but then soon hundreds of people were compelled to dance as well. Within a week or so, hundreds if not thousands of people were affected and entire communities were brought to their knees by unstoppable urge to dance. People weren't just dancing normally either. Many threw themselves into fits of contortions and gyrations, leaping and jumping and twisting in ways that were unnatural. Their eyes rolled back in their heads and they frothed at the mouth. It looked less like dancing and more like a seizure. They danced all day and all night. In the end, women, young, old, healthy, or sick, no one was spared. The dancing never stopped. It went on for weeks, and we don't know exactly how many people it affected because records were incomplete at the time. But estimates say that around 400 people were affected. Many died from exhaustion, heart attacks, or strokes. Others simply disappeared while dancing in the street. Some people ran away from their homes and families, never to be seen again. All they could do was dance. She'd been out working in the fields all day and she was exhausted. So when she got home, she took off her dress, put on her nightgown, and got into bed. But she couldn't fall asleep. Religious authorities responded by having the dancers whipped and beaten in an attempt to drive out whatever evil was inside them. They also chained people up to chariots like horses and whipped the horses as they pulled the dancers around in circles. You can probably guess that this didn't work. Instead, the measures taken to stop the dancing seemed to make it worse. More and more people were affected, and entire villages would sometimes be wiped out by this dancing sickness. She tossed and turned restlessly for hours until finally she got up to go to the window to get some fresh air. As she stood there, though, she felt something strange. She wanted to dance, and so she did, dancing in her nightgown at the window. The next day, she felt the same urge to dance. What the heck was going on? When the dancing plague first broke out in Strasbourg, people thought that it must have been caused by some sort of evil spirit, perhaps the devil himself. As the dancing continued unabated, people began to look for other possible causes. Some blamed a local miller who'd ground poison rye into flour. These outbreaks would continue periodically for the next 300 years with no rhyme or reason to when and where they would happen. Typically, it started with one person, sometimes two or three, feeling an overwhelming desire to dance. Outbreaks would last anywhere from a few days to several months. Eventually, the dancing would subside and life would return to normal. Most experts agree that the dancing plague was most likely a form of mass psychogenic illness, also known as mass hysteria. Documented cases of people in the throes of the dancing plague biting and scratching others in an attempt to give them the disease. But there is another possibility. The symptoms of the dancing plague bear a striking resemblance to those of ergotism, a disease caused by a fungus called ergot that grows on rye. There's evidence to support both theories. We don't know which one is correct or if it was a combination of the two. In 1418, for instance, a woman in a village in Switzerland began dancing uncontrollably. This suggests that there must have been something else at play, some unknown pathogen that infected people with a strange dancing sickness. There are dozens of accounts of dancing plagues throughout history, but these early outbreaks seem to be the ones most likely caused by a yet unknown disease. In any case, the dancing plague remains an enduring mystery. Except, wait a minute, in 1918, there was another outbreak of dancing mania in a small village in Iraq. That's right, the dancing plague strikes again. Over the next few days, the number of dancers grew and soon entire families were dancing non-stop until they died, okay? But for real this time, the dancing plague is over.